off
Eric,
now.
yours is the other a vacant seat that we're interviewing for?
Okay, Chair Metzen, in about 10 seconds we can start.
Okay.
Is the computer supposed to be showing anything?
Are you not getting your,
I have a
I don't see it.
almost there?
call the roll.
Okay. It is 6:18 p.m. on November 22nd. Let's call the meeting to order.
Derek Metzen.
Here.
Claire Met is absent, but I believe she's excused. Jonathan Stone is absent. Ken Basinger.
Here.
Robert Seward.
Here.
Okay. So today we'll be conducting interviews for the HRB.
That's correct. Just a little overview quickly. There are two positions up, the Kenema position and the architect position. Two of the four applicants are here right now, so we'll run through that. There are questions in front of you. We'll probably round robin those questions. Just to remind you, if you ask a new question, to make sure everybody gets that question. So we do have you can ask follow-up questions, but I recommend if there is an additional question, you ask it to each interviewee. The way HRB appointments work, the Historic Review Board provides recommendation to the mayor, who makes the formal appointment. There will be no deliberations tonight, and if we don't have everyone here, we may have to have another interview time before the first of the year. But we'll provide, the Historic Review Board needs to provide direction via email to city staff.
Okay.
And then if we have general direction, we'll provide that recommendation to the mayor, and if there's not general direction, we will determine next steps.
Okay.
So
Very
at
good.
this time, we're actually going to turn off the video. So everyone's interviews are not, for posterity, but because it's a public meeting, we're going to turn the audio on.
Okay.
And then we will turn the video back on when we resume the rest of the meeting. So at this time, I'm going to go over and it's right here. I'm going to turn on the audio. On hold. I just did this about
I have a spare. Thank you.
Somewhere.
Okay, well, I just did that a little bit before, and I don't know what happened. So we have a secondary one.
Didn't bring my code in.
Did it work?
Are you good?
Okay, great. So I'm going to start that.
It's here.
Okay. So at this time, we can ask Mr. Post to come up to the dais. I'm going to put this right next to you, so we have your interview
Okay.
recording.
Oh, Howard, thanks for joining us today. You're a familiar face to this board, so it's good to see you here. So I can start with number one. We'll just go down the row.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay. So Howard, why are you applying for a position on the HRB?
Well, I lived in Kenema for 23 years. I was chair of the Kenema Neighborhood Association for 18. I was chair of the HRB for 6, and I'm just concerned with the development in Kenema. We're not against development, but there are guidelines and rules, and we just say, hey, they need to be adhered, and that's what we're doing.
Great. Thank you.
What is your background in historic preservation?
Well, like I said, I lived here for 23 years. I was the chair for 18 years. I built 8 houses. I've remodeled probably 40 more, so I'm pretty aware of buildings. And I'm concerned of the development in the historic district.
Bob?
I'm almost there. Well, you already answered this part of this question. How you served on an appointed board before HRB. Have you any other boards that you've served on? Or no? Okay. What was the most rewarding part of the position on the HRB for you?
Say it again.
The most rewarding part of serving on HRB?
Well, we have some input to what it is, and we're not against development, but, it just, the whole thing with Kenema is compatibility. And if you're building next to a historic house, and you kind of try to make it the same, you can't tell people what to build. but you kind of make it the same. It's new, but it's old. And, you know, generally with roof pitch and windows is where it's at. Other than that, you don't have much leeway.
Okay. How would you approach a potential contentious issue?
I mean, what do you mean contentious?
Well, there's folks that are passionate on both sides of an issue.
Well-
We have folks who come in who feel very strongly one way and folks who feel very strongly another. And so if you were sitting on this side of this table, how would you approach that discussion?
Well, the art of politics is compromise. I mean, you know, you can't be, when you sit there, I don't think you can have a hard, fast decision. You have to be open. If you bring something in, or Christina brings something in, or somebody else brings something in, you say, well, gee, I never even thought of that. Then you have to be open to where it's at. The thing probably that concerns me is the HRB makes a ruling, it goes.
All right, thank you. So we've just had our interviews, which we've recorded on a separate recording device, and now we're back.
Okay.
Did Christina explain the process moving forward?
That we would deliberate and make our votes via email.
So individually, and email them directly to Trevor, so we don't want to have a meeting over email. So send them to Trevor. If all
Okay.
3 votes match, then we'll move that forward to recommend for the mayor to approve.
Okay.
And if they don't match, we'll come back at a meeting and talk it out.
What about the architect position?
Trevor, do you want to explain, please?
So, there's a couple things with the architect position. So, I guess I'll start off with this. Your position's not up until, I believe, March.
So you came on midterm, so you have a couple of months if you have the availability to stay on board until we get an architect.
Okay.
We did not have any applications for the architect position.
But the one I was hoping that did, so there's kind of 2 strategies here.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, well, obviously look for an architect, and hopefully there's one around. Just talking to one recently, maybe they'll come back, and then, or if that doesn't happen, I believe the bylaws say a profession of historic preservation nature.
Yeah, I believe it's an
So-
architect or a general contractor.
This application
Sure.
from Tasha Hara Tama is not an architect?
Not an architect, but she's a historian,
Okay.
who I think could fill that role if we don't happen to find an architect in that time period. So that's
Okay.
kind of why she was included in all of this.
Okay.
So we're going to repost on AIA and go back to try and find an architect. If we look for 6 months and can't find an architect, the board can appoint someone as an alternative in that position.
Okay, excellent. And I can stay on for a few more months.
Great, and thank you for putting you on the spot, because I don't know that we told you that ahead of this meeting, so thank you very much. We
You don't
really
know if you told me
appreciate
what?
it. If we informed you that you could stay on past December before
You
just
did
2
not.
minutes. So, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. So we could figure out, and then if we get an architect in, then, you could.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Okay. And with that, should we adjourn the meeting?
Do you want these
So there's
scores?
nothing else I see on the
Do you
agenda.
want to collect these?
Oh, there. Oh, I didn't even go to the agenda.
I mean,
Never
yeah,
mind.
yeah, I can
So we
collect
can
them
break
if
for
you're ready
dinner?
for me to collect them.
Oh gosh, sorry, I skipped way ahead.
Okay.
I was like, I didn't think we went through 6 items. But okay.
We're so fast, we can't even.
Yeah, so we'll jump to the preservation grant, PC 16 dash 117, PG 16 dash 03.
Perfect. Okay. So up next we have a grant application from Corey Woods. The applicant is requesting approval to replace an existing porch and windowsill on a historic structure and replace it with a compatible wood porch and windowsill. What I have right here, I'll pass this around, but I have this is from the contractor he's elected to use, Framing Force Inc., and these are just some pictures of other projects that they've done. I'll pass that along.
And we can pass that along in the audience if anybody wants to see it.
Okay.
So the grant proposal, the applicant is primarily requesting approval to replace the floor of an existing porch on the front of a historic structure and replace it with a compatible wood floor. And the additional work includes demoing existing decking surface and stairs, salvage front steps, so you can kind of see that's pointing to the porch of the front of the house. And this is kind of more or less what it looks like at this point in time. Other work is to shore up deck removal and installation of a new deck surface, furnish and install new 3-inch tongue and groove Douglas fir deck surface, furnish and install new pressure-treated stringers in front of deck stairs, furnish and install deck paint gray, remove one windowsill in the upstairs bedroom, and there's a picture of the sill. Furnish and install one new cedar sill. Furnish and install white paint for the windowsill. Provide equipment for the scope. Provide expert supervision and cleanup as well. So, and then going on to the presentation, this is some of the work that's in the contractor's items that they've performed, and it's more or less just outlining that they've done this work in the past. They're qualified to do this work, and that's why they've chosen to go with this contractor.
Okay.
Some more images. A set of stairs that was done. That's mostly it.
Trevor has the magic touch. There we go.
Oh, and so the applicant is in the audience, and I would like to invite him to come speak when he would like.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Corey Woods, 512 6th Street.
Excellent. And what would you like to add about your project?
I wanted to get it done just for the fact that it's the dry rot, and I want to keep the house up to par with, what community and the district stand kind of is.
Okay. And did anyone here have any questions for him?
And I would like to just clarify that it's a window sill, not the entire window frame, just the window sill.
Yeah, the window sill is kind of just thrown in there for formality. It's just mainly the deck on that with the grant. The sill, just the contractor is gonna piece with it. It's not necessarily needs to be part of it or not, but I threw it in there as it's gonna get done anyways.
Okay. How did you select your general contractor?
This one was a word of mouth from social media, essentially. I put on my Facebook looking for names. He got back to me, and then I also went did two off Craigslist. One responded to me, and that was my other bid. So it was really just word of mouth.
Okay. Jonathan, do you have any questions for him?
Unfortunately, I am just now getting oriented, so.
Okay. Okay. Well, unless you have anything else to add?
No, I didn't have any. Unless there's any questions.
Okay. No. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
I have a question for staff. What is the status of our preservation grant budget?
Great. So our budget is $5,000 a year. We have now, as a city, we are in a 2-year budget cycle. So in a sense, we have $10,000 to spend over 2 years, which is nice. We don't have to worry on the in-between budget years, we can push over. I haven't added it up, but I think we have $2,000 from last budget, and I think this is the first one of this budget.
Mhm.
Okay.
Is this the second year of the cycle?
We're in the second year of the cycle.
I move for approval of the grant application.
Okay,
Oh.
do I have a
I'll
second?
second, yeah.
Okay.
I guess we'll take roll.
Mhm.
Yes. So, shoot. Go. So, Derek Metzen,
Yes.
Claire Met is absent. Jonathan Stone,
Yes.
Ken Basinger,
Yes?
and Robert Seward.
Yes.
Passes 4-0.
Excellent.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, and have fun with your house repair.
Yes.
So the applicant, you can work with Trevor on the details. He'll send you an email about next steps. Yeah, thank you very much for coming.
Okay. So with that, we'll move on to a design advice.
Well, the applicant so far is not here. I'm wondering if they're stuck in the same traffic that everyone else is.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
I actually recommend, if possible, we could move to the next application, which is
The hearing?
HR 1602.
Yeah.
And this is actually the first night for the public hearing. Last month, we actually did a design advice, so I will need Chair Metzen to read your favorite opening statement. If you look in your application, your agenda packet, you'll see that we did not write a staff report because we received revised drawings from Mr. Green based on actually input from the Historic Review Board the Monday before the agenda needed to go out. But we did want to make sure that it was brought to the board this month, that the Kenema Neighborhood Association had a chance to review it. We will not be having a meeting in December, and so this will be reviewed with a staff report. The second meeting will be in January with a full staff report. So this is a chance to kind of review the changes, provide some direction, and wait in January for the staff report.
Okay.
The one key issue is the 120-day land use deadline is looming. So in order, one thing request staff asked before the continuation that the applicant provides an oral agreement to move the 120-day land use date to March 1st.
Okay.
And then with that, that continuation can happen.
Okay. But the owner for this project is here, right?
He is here, yeah.
Okay, good. And all right. It's a little interesting that we're reviewing it. That's
I know. So what we can do tonight, we can just allow, I think it was in a situation that this allows the neighborhood to kind of review it. If the
Mhm.
board doesn't want to provide any direction, the staff can just provide the revisions.
yeah, but we're
And
not
then
voting on
it-
it tonight.
What?
We're not voting on it tonight.
Nope. We can provide
Okay.
the revisions and then open up the public comment,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Okay.
continue it with with the agreement of the 120-day land use.
All right. Does anyone have the public notice item for me to read?
It should be right in front of you.
I have a lot of papers. I apologize.
This one right.
I also have it.
I thought you'd have that memorized by now.
Mm-mm.
In my pile, I know it is.
Found it. Good.
Good.
All right. Thank you for your patience, everyone. And I apologize in advance for this very long-winded statement. Now we commence with the public hearing on agenda item HR 1602, a request for approval of construction of a new single-family residence in the Kenema National Register District. The criteria for approval of a land use action are contained in Chapter 17 of the Oregon City Municipal Code. The proposed development must comply with the applicable provisions contained in the City of Oregon City comprehensive plan. Generally, unless otherwise noted, if a request is found to be consistent with the municipal code, it is considered consistent with the comprehensive plan. If you wish to participate in this hearing, including challenges for bias or conflict of interest, you must complete the sign-in form located on the table at the front of the room, back there, and deliver it to staff. Please do so immediately. The chair will only recognize those who have submitted completed forms. Testimony will be taken in the following order. First, applicant. Second, testimony in favor. Third, testimony in opposition. Fourth, rebuttal by applicant. When recognized by the chair, please come forward to the podium, give your name, address, and make your statement. All testimonial arguments and evidence presented regarding this request must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria in the planned land use regulation which the person believes to apply to this decision. Please address only the applicable criteria for the decision. Please do not repeat testimony. If you wish, you may choose to merely agree with a previous speaker's statements. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing. Such issues shall be raised and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Commission and the parties an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statement or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of a person to participate in public hearing, either orally or in writing, precludes that person's right of appeal to the City Council or LUBA. Written testimony submitted prior to the hearing constitutes participation in the hearing. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application. The Commission shall grant such request by continuing the public hearing pursuant to the standards contained in ORS 197.763. Do any of the board members have a conflict of interest or ex parte contact regarding this application?
No.
Nope. Who has visited the site? Everyone here. Okay. Does anyone from the audience wish to provide comment or challenge a conflict of interest or ex parte contact regarding this application?
Public comment can happen. Wait, yeah, after applicant's presentation.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. With that, I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Metzen. As you recall, at the last meeting, the Design Advice, the Historic Review Board provided some direction to the applicant, and I'm going to walk through the revised drawings just to indicate where that happened, and then provide a little bit of kind of direction and lens the board can start thinking about, and as well as the applicant. And then we'll bring the applicant up, who will provide any additional context. After that, we'll have public comment, and then any questions the board may have before we move to continue it to the January meeting.
Okay.
Excuse me. So, as you recall, the Historic Review Board made directions to continue to move toward dropping the height of the structure. The applicant was able to drop it 1 foot. The site plan, which I will show, let's see, where's the site plan? Oops, sorry. You notice in the site plan, the applicant actually brought the house even further towards the property line, farther up the hill, as a way to continue to mitigate for that mass. The other thing that the Historic Review Board did request was to continue with a design that has a further offset between the garage and the house to further differentiate that massing. You can see that. I'm going to go to the rear elevation. You recall there was some arched windows in the October presentation. There's direction to provide more of a a rectilinear approach. So this is the revised part of that. So if you see, but at the end of the day, we still have kind of a secondary daylight basement because of the topography. I'm going to bring the applicant up, and he can talk a little bit more, but I think the larger question the Historic Review Board needs to look at as we move forward, I think, are two things. One, has the applicant provided a design that has mitigated the impact any house would have on the sloped lot? So in other words, regardless of the design, because of the slope of this lot, is there any other alternative design that could better meet the intent of the design guidelines regarding to massing, specifically kind of lower sub-basement massing? So that was kind of the direction that I gave to the applicant was, regardless of this particular design, have you made your case that any design would be having to mitigate for this? And is there an alternative analysis that he can do as part of this application? The second part is we do have, in a sense, an attached garage because you have the basement living area attached to the basement living area of the garage. So in this situation, we just 2 months ago had a house that had a breezeway proposed, and the Historic Review Board removed that proposal. So if the board is supportive of this approach, what is your extenuating circumstances? What is your findings that can differentiate this approach from the previous request to remove the breezeway? Is it site specific? Is it design specific? Is it size specific? Is it impact specific? I think those are some of the findings the Historic Review Board should be looking at, and staff as it moves forward in January. Staff put a one-page memo together that kind of captured these comments and because of timing, but that's kind of where we're at right now. There's still an exposed rear sub-basement, and the applicant is, other than providing more fill on a steep lot, the applicant is expressed that he's tried as many mitigation tactics as he can through this design revisions from the board. So the board doesn't have to make any comment on this today, but it's really, I see kind of how is this proposal meet the design guidelines, and are there site-specific extenuating circumstances because of the lot slope? So any questions from the board to myself or Trevor before we bring the applicant up?
Let's talk about that previous breezeway. Now, that was an open breezeway, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you said that they could not have that open breezeway?
We said that
We
the
added that
breezeway
as a
had to be
condition,
removed. And I'm referring to the property on 4th Avenue that was approved in October. So that breezeway was required to be moved to separate the garage from the main building. Now, is that, so I don't have the answer for you, but it could be the findings related to it's apples and oranges, and the 4th Avenue, the board made a finding about massing and connecting the massing between the garage and the house, and the width of the proposed house on the application in October is much wider than this application.
It was much wider, yeah.
So I'm not giving you specific findings, but
Right.
how does the board, if they approve this in January, provide specific findings that can better articulate the design guidelines and how the applicant has tried to meet and or mitigated or did an alternative analysis to show why this is really the only approach to the site?
Okay.
I made the motion to remove the covered breezeway in that application. Would you like to hear my logic in that and how it relates to
We
this?
should wait till deliberation to talk about
Yeah.
Okay.
that. But thank you. We will talk about that. And with that, unless staff has anything more to add, we'll invite up the applicant.
Come on.
Thanks for joining us today. Please state your name and your address for the record.
Dave Green, I'm the applicant. My address is 7537 Southeast 116th Avenue in Portland. Christina did a good job of summarizing basically what I've tried to accomplish since we had the design advice session. We moved the building forward 3 feet relative to the garage. I dropped the main floor an additional 1 foot. So I added 1 riser between the garage and the breezeway, and 1 more riser between the breezeway and the house to get the house down 1 more foot. And then the steps that she mentioned, changing the rear facade, the deck cover with the curved ceiling and the curved glass, we eliminated that. So it would seem that probably the main situation to try to overcome is the massing from the rear. And I guess my thought, you'll see the little optional vegetative screen that I thought may be as advantageous as anything to screen. And essentially that would just consist of like a 6-inch mesh posts. And in my addendum there's a picture of a new screen that some people installed. Obviously it's just started some vines, so you can see that construction. You could obviously imagine what that would be. But also coincidentally on a building that I'm working on, they have a 3-foot cyclone fence in front of the house, and they had planted wisteria on there. And I don't know if wisteria is the most beautiful vegetation, but is very effective at screening. And if you have those pictures available, you can see just a cyclone fence that screened the front of that building pretty effectively. It's cluttered a little bit because there's a deciduous tree behind it on the left that kind of covers part of the roof, but if you can consider that not there, you would see that horizontal line established by the vegetative screening really effectively screens the house right up to the gutter line, and then the gutter line and the roof would be plainly visible. So that was one option that I proposed to help screen that bottom portion of the house.
Okay. I would just like to say that I can tell you took our comments to heart and made quite a few changes here.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that, and that makes this much easier. You really did adjust the house design to our comments. So thank you for taking Kanima's unique design aesthetic into account here.
Mm-hmm.
I am curious how much fill you anticipate taking offsite.
I anticipate taking pretty much everything that we excavate for the basement because there's really nowhere to place fill on the slope. I'm confident that we can't place any fill on the downslope. Mm-hmm. My elevation doesn't really show it, but the topography map does show. I mean, it's just a 67% slope all the way down from there, and I don't think the geotech would advise putting any fill on the slope, and I wouldn't want to have the liability of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Have you had your geotech report done yet?
I haven't done that yet because I wanted to make sure that we established what the footprint and the shape of the building would be before I took that next step.
Okay. You said you have a 60% slope?
67% slope from there down, yeah.
Pretty steep. It's somewhat steeper than what you see there on that side elevation from there on down. And that elevation represents the downhill corner being essentially at the existing grade, filling the uphill corner about a foot and a half from existing grade is what that reflects there.
Just
relative to the elevation of the street on the east side of the building, the floor line is even with the level of the street. On the west side, the building
the street is 6 feet higher, so the main floor level is 6 feet below street level on the west side of the garage, actually. So at midpoint of the structure, basically the main floor is 3 feet below street level.
Okay. I haven't run numbers, but just roughly scaling here, it appears that the slope is about 35%.
I miscalculated it.
Okay. You've got 15 feet of rise and 26 feet, roughly. Just scaling off your plan.
From the
Over here.
rear of the house to the rear property line,
20.
we dropped from an elevation of 168 to an elevation of 125 midpoint.
And I'm just scaling off the back portion where you would have an opportunity to put fill. So I see on what would be the south side of the property, you have
Yeah.
roughly 30 to 35%. On the north side, you do have about 45% at the steepest portion. Okay. Any questions? No? Okay. Jonathan? No? Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, that should do it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
For public comment?
Do we have anyone?
Not that I know of. Is there anybody here for public comment for this application?
Okay. Angela, would you mind stepping up and joining us? Give your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I am new to the neighborhood, and my name is Angela Trimble, and I live at 410 3rd Avenue. I am at the other end of that lovely hill. I am a new homeowner. I have never owned my own home before, so this was a wonderful learning opportunity, as you can imagine. And stumbling upon this site, to be able to find a home that had such amazing remodel, to be able to have your first home and to have everything so new and clean. It was built in 1955, and when it was purchased in 2015 by the gentleman I bought it from, he showed me and communicated how that hill had gotten to the house itself and was overgrown with everything, and he had done with like the raspberry bushes or blackberry bushes and all that ivy and stuff. So when he bought it, he actually excavated the back and he put up this retaining wall. It looks amazing. It really does. It was kind of funny because I had told my partner that he won't ever have to think about shoveling snow ever again until all the leaves fell, and then that was a whole other story. When I bought the home, I found out that the sewer scope had failed, and so that had to be that you could not get from the house to the main, and that was replaced. And we've only been there a couple of weeks, and so we were taking a walk and found this lovely hearing up above, and found this out, that we are on a landslide area and that there has been some measurements and geotech stuff done. And I would just like to be assured of my safety and concern of the impact of that. Beautiful home. But yeah, I'm just so now I'm worried and I'm scared, and I just got there, and that's not how we should be enjoying this amazing opportunity. So that's all I have. Thank you, gentlemen.
Angela, thank you for sharing your thoughts. I will say that this board has no purview on that, but there is a fairly rigorous overlay on this property, geological hazard. He has to have a geotech report done, which has recommendations on how deep footings are, how they're to be placed, how wide they are to be, and how to mitigate any landslides or movement of the building. And it's having gone through that process, he's got his work cut out for him to keep you safe. So the city's looking out for you. And I'm sure you'll get notice on that land use decision or process here in the next few months. So thank you. Paul, please join us.
Thank you, Paul Edgar, Oregon City, Kanema. The building guidelines call for the house to be really lined up as close as we can to the immediate historic house next door, or some of the other historic houses that are downslope from 4th Avenue. So there should be some continuity, basically rhythm, and that's what they say in the building guidelines. The height of the house is spelled out in the building guidelines, and it tells us that we can't be more than, I think it's 1.5 stories maximum height of the house, including plus the basement. The residential elevation can be 18 feet above grade unless there are topographical considerations. I have, when the house was surveyed, I talked to the surveyor about the topology, and he said that he could see the ground sliding around it all over when he was walking up and down. So I understand that the elevation is probably the degree of slope is right around 35% across with the property, and I have that exact measurement from the surveyor on another email at home. The bulk and mass of this house is significantly greater and than what our building guidelines allow for, and it exceeds the style of the neighborhood, and that's and there's a statement here in the bulk and mass that buildings with excessive mass for style chosen for the neighborhood are not allowed. The porches that are being proposed, again, it's they say in the building guidelines that you should only have one porch, not two, okay. I would like to effectively, once we get this final design plan, I'd like to take it through and part of a contingency to take it out. I'd like to go through it step by step, windows, because the proportion of the windows based upon the building guidelines don't look to be similar to what is allowed. There are statements about it being not allowed within the building guidelines.
Chair Metzen, just let you know we are at 3 minutes for
We are
public
right now?
hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
Please. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay. And with that, unless we had any other comments, I'll invite the applicant to come back up for rebuttal.
At this time, the applicant can make agreement to the waiver of the 120-day land use decision to March 1st for the record.
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sorry for my paperwork.
Okay.
Basically, I think probably the constraint of the slope. We have a building here that is essentially a 1.5-story construction with a basement, and the constraint of the slope. We have essentially a 26 by 28 foot residence with a 6-foot connecting link to a single garage. It's about as conservative as you can get, I think, size-wise. That meets my goals and parallels, I believe, the city's goals as well. So I guess I'm not sure how much smaller you could get in order to mitigate the slopes any further. 26 by 28 is a fairly minimal size structure, but I guess that would be my only comment.
Okay. I would encourage you to address your thoughts on window sizes and why you selected the window sizes you did.
I think the only window that the designer mistook for me is the one right in the peak, and that should have been a 2.0 that's wider than I intended.
The front peak?
On the front elevation, yeah, excuse me, right over the front porch. That, there again, kind of replicates what's on the Coburn house, and the scale is somewhat different on the Coburn house, but my intent there was for, I believe there's a 2.6 window there, and I think he has a 3-foot window, so the proportion was a little off on that. The windows to the right of the front porch is over a counter in the kitchen. We're constrained by counter height, and so I used a matching window on the left side of the porch too for symmetry, and tried to essentially follow the guidelines best I could otherwise.
Okay. Regarding the porches, I see that you have some sight lines indicated in the back. Is that what I see?
That was to try to illustrate, yes, the steeper sight lines are from the rear property line, just basically the smaller dotted lines, viewing it from the rear property line, the shallower pitches, just basically plotting it out, just so there would be a visual reference when you're looking up at the rear of the house, what you would see. And part of that was initially because of the curved porch that I had and so forth. I was trying to demonstrate by those that you would see very little of that, if any. You would only see it through the rail. But of course we made that change at any rate. But basically that's what that's referencing, is just a visual sight line from 3rd Street and from the rear property line.
Looking at the right elevation, this is where we end up seeing the tallest elevation of the building. And I can tell you step the foundation because that's the most economical way to go. It also leads to a very tall elevation on that side, giving an appearance of a 2-story, 3-story house, that sort of thing. Had you considered any other options to deal with the foundation or the basement portion? The sub-basement, I should say.
Christina and I discussed a little bit the concept of maybe terracing or something. The problem is essentially I'm just pretty confident we can't depart very much from the existing slope. So terracing would stair-step it, and ultimately it's likely, I would do some just for landscape planting areas and so forth anyway, not specifically reflecting that because I don't see that as effectively changing how much building is revealed. And I noted in my addendum that even the changes that we made, I realize are somewhat incremental in addressing that, just because of the existing grades, and I'm pretty confident that we really can't change the contour of the slope significantly without, creating hazard.
Okay. Oh, please, by all means.
The site plan does not indicate how close the neighboring house is on what would be the...
We're 24 feet from the property line, and then there's a 12-foot pedestrian easement, undeveloped pedestrian easement, and the neighboring house, I believe, is pretty much right on the property line, so we're approximately 36 feet from the neighboring house.
Okay, so you would have plenty of room in there to put in greenery that would mitigate the view from the street of that tall elevation.
Landscape.
There's room to do, sure, and maybe screening there again might be.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that might be useful just for privacy with the neighbor and so forth. Anyway, so that would certainly be a viable alternative, I think.
Would you mind addressing the breezeway? That you felt that was appropriate?
Yes, the breezeway essentially becomes, and this was part of my original design narrative, but because I have a 3 bedrooms downstairs, I have more square footage downstairs than I need on the upper level. So that's a connecting link, you might say, between the bedroom areas downstairs. And so to essentially get a 3-bedroom house, I would either need to make the footprint larger to put the 3 bedrooms in the main footprint under the house, make it taller to put a bedroom above, or whatever. So in my endeavor, this was the most conservative approach to try to keep the whole structure with a small footprint.
Because a living space below an exterior deck would not necessarily be historically appropriate, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
If
there's
the
living
garage was
space
detached.
below the garage, right. So that's the guest bedroom, and then there's 2 bedrooms below the main portion of the house with the connecting hallways.
And I promise I'll turn the questions over to the other folks really, really soon. I want to go back to that right elevation.
Sure.
As we're talking about that, I'm looking at the slopes, and it appears that I'm trying to find the elevation. There we go. The elevation towards the center of the house in the front is about 180. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm at that's up at the upper level, and
At the upper level, towards the front of the house, and about in the center, near the entryway, is about 180. Is that right?
yes.
Okay. Then, as I go to the right, looking at the plan or site plan, the corner of the house is about 175. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
In your right elevation, it appears that the elevation of the corner house is about 9 feet below the finished floor, when it should be illustrated about 5 feet below the finished floor. Am I incorrect in that?
Finished floor is 186. Basically, on my plot plan,
That's what I saw in your plot plan, but I'm not sure how that matches up with the exterior grades.
let me look at. I'm looking at the one that I had him. I'm planning on some rockeries to.
And I guess this is not an item that we have to solve tonight.
Yeah.
But that
Okay,
is
he kind of neglected to show the rockeries that I plan to have coming towards the street from stepping down from the front porch. So you'll see on the plot plan a little 185. So basically that's just a foot down from the porch elevation.
okay.
Out maybe 2 feet. Then there'll be a rockery, and we'll step down 3 foot to 182. You see 182 there, close. Then there would be another rockery that would come out parallel with the street to the right a little bit, and then turn out towards the street. So basically, I'm stepping down in 3 foot increments. So we would be down to 179. But then going towards the rear of the house from there, we're at 176. So basically, we're 10 feet below finished floor level at that point. It
Okay.
could be 177 or whatever, but existing grade is about 175 there right now.
Okay. I would encourage you to go back and look at these elevate, and it may be because what we're looking at is just the topo lines just kind of fade out, but it appears that the house is downhill from the 180 elevation, and if your house's first floor or top floor elevation is at 186, that's quite a bit above the grade that I see in front of the house. So I'm wondering if my largest concern when I'm looking at this application is due to a drafting error. And if that could be clarified when we come back,
Sure.
that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to put undue conditions of approval or burdens upon you if it's a simple error.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look at what's the 177 there?
And I was not sure if that was the finished floor elevation, but I'm seeing 180 here and 180 here. I'm pointing at the corners of the property so everyone can see what we're
Oh,
discussing.
right.
And then where those would connect is about the front of the porch towards 4th Street. It'd be safe to assume that the top floor elevation of the house would be about 180.5, thereabouts, because it would be raised up a little bit from the ground. Now,
Oh, that's probably the basement level. So
so
Yeah,
170
in the parentheses is basement level elevation. Sorry, when you're looking at you're seeing the main floor elevations, not in parentheses, and then in parentheses are the basement floor elevations.
based on the topo I see here, I think everything's raised up 5 feet from where it should be. But please go back and look at that. Maybe I'm wrong. I encourage you to let me know if I am. Again, because your garage is said to be at an elevation of 188.
Right, and
That is 8 feet above the topo, running towards the front of it, towards 4th Street, and 3 feet above topo, not 2 feet in front of it, which you're not going to have a 45-degree into it. So I think there's just something that's a little off there.
basically, I moved the catch basin back from where it originally was, and you'll see that the existing street elevation on the left there, the west side, is 192, and took the catch basin down to 187, which I figured was as much as we could accommodate to try to get the whole building as low as possible. Then I'm back up to 188 for the garage floor. So I've got 5 feet of cross slope there and about 22 feet, basically.
Okay. And this topography is based off the survey or
Off the
assumptions?
the published maps, the Oregon City topo maps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for the applicant? No? No? Okay. Thank you so much for coming in today. Okay. And with that,
So that I recommend the Historic Review Board provide a motion to continue this application to the January HRB meeting.
So moved.
do we have a second?
Second.
All right.
Derek Metzen,
Yes.
Jonathan Stone,
yes.
Ken Basinger,
Yes.
Robert Seward.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is the applicant here for design advice, PC 16114?
Yes, and just 1 second, we're going to switch out our PowerPoints.
Okay, great. While staff's getting together, Dave, I want to say again, I really appreciate you taking thought and consideration to our design advice. It was obvious that you walked away with some good thoughts and integrated them into the design.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So 1 second, we'll do a staff introduction.
Cottage homes. This is a portion of the code that we don't see very often.
I know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Metzen. This is design advice for a proposal for a cottage housing project in Kenema. Just to reiterate, design advice was created a couple of years ago to allow applicants who are working on applications to come to the Historic Review Board, provide some of their initial work, get individual, non-binding comments back from the board. We will open up for public comments tonight. I recommend that we follow the normal public hearing rules, which is 3 minutes for public comments. If the Kenema Neighbor Association has an authorized speaker, they are allowed 15 minutes, but they would be speaking on behalf of the Neighbor Association. Otherwise, everyone has 3 minutes for comment. This application also has various other design overlays and development reviews that will be happening. This property is located in our geologic hazards overlay district, as our cottage housing, which is a permitted use in the residential zones all over the city. It goes through a type 2 administrative review under site plan and design review. There's specific prescribed requirements that are clear and objective for the cottage housing. So the applicant's role is to ensure at the same time that this is being reviewed under the lens of 1740 and the Historic Review Board. The applicant will also be working with planning staff to work through that. An example of something that we did before is the new construction in McLaughlin neighborhood, the Paspali building. They had that bifurcated process where the Historic Review Board provided a review of the new construction with the lens of the design guidelines. Then the applicant also had to go through a type 2 site plan design review and make sure that both criteria could be met. We also have an interesting situation here where there was a wetland discovered on the property that was not part of the 1999 Natural Resource Overlay Zone survey. In the state of Oregon, the Division of State Lands regulates the actual wetland, whereas our overlay zone regulates the buffer. So in this unique situation, there is no buffer around the wetlands, but the applicant is working with the Division of State Lands and requirement to make sure that the wetland itself is protected as part of this development. So I think that's kind of the next steps. The applicant has not applied for any of his land use applications yet. So what I asked the board tonight, and also the neighborhood, is this really the lens is how this proposal is meeting both the Chapter 1740 Historic District Overlay Zone criteria and the design guidelines for new construction. As you can imagine, in 2006, when we adopted the design guidelines for new construction, we did not anticipate cottage housing. We generally wrote it for new construction of single-family homes and potentially some commercial buildings in the Kenema district. So the board, something to start to think about is how would you take our existing design guidelines and use that lens in your findings when this applicant actually comes in for a land use application on historic review. And on the applicant's end, it's really up to the applicant to provide additional findings when we have design guidelines that there may not be directly kind of addressing certain issues with the cottage housing. So at some point I'm going to give it to the applicant, but we have kind of let the applicant know that he has a little bit of an additional burden to make that case where there are areas of the design guidelines that might be vague or may not be applicable. This applicant needs to help the historic review to understand how this proposal would not have an adverse effect on the district, or if it did, it could be mitigated. And so that's kind of the lens I hope everyone's looking at. Tonight is just design advice, so remember you can give non-binding comments back to the applicant that speak for just you yourself as a board member. And the neighborhood association know that this is only the beginning of the process. So we hope to use the design advice really as a way to allow people to get review of the proposal early and often. So we are not all at a place where we have a complete application and we have to quickly review. So with that, I'd like to give it to the applicant, Chris Staggs, who has a small revisions to the PDFs that were attached to your agenda. So I'll let him describe how this PowerPoint is slightly different, and he'll kind of take you through the proposal. You can ask questions to Mr. Staggs, and then we'll open it up for public comment.
And I would encourage, do people have to fill out the form for public comment?
So if you wanted to speak tonight, please fill out one of these forms. They're in the back.
Please
and
do
I
that.
can take them.
Yeah, please do that now and hand it to staff now. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, I'm Chris Staggs,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the applicant for this project. First, I just wanted to say thank you for giving us this opportunity to do design advice. We've been had many conversations with the planning department, with Christina and the historic planners at the city on several occasions till now. So what you're seeing today is actually has been a process that we started several months ago, really wanting to have a very complete understanding of the Kenema neighborhood, Kenema historic district. And as Christina's already mentioned, there's a lot of overlays that we're working with in this project. So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things to consider. And we're just really thankful for the assistance we've been given already up till this point. And we understand that tonight is really just a kind of preliminary look at this and design advice from the Historic Review Board, and we will take that information and take it to heart and really consider those things in a very comprehensive way. So what I'd like to do is spend just I think I have 15 minutes to describe the project, and I know that everyone has already seen these drawings and documents and narrative. The narrative is a little bit blurry at the moment on the screen, so you probably can't read that, but I know that all this information is available online, and anyone who wants to read our narrative can do that. But I'd like to just kind of give everyone a big picture. Actually, before I do that, I'd like to just mention that we did attend the Kenema Neighborhood Association meeting this last Thursday, and had a pretty detailed conversation about it. So the Kenema neighborhood is very interested and aware of the project and participating in a really good way. So we're glad about that too. So big picture, basically is we're proposing a cottage home development on this, I'll call it an L-shaped site in Kenema, at the corner of 4th and Miller. We're clearly working with many different guidelines here. We have the historic guidelines, we have the residential guidelines of the city, we have the cottage home development guidelines. But tonight being about the historic review, we're going to focus on the Kenema neighborhood historic guidelines. So the homes are sited in a way that we believe is in keeping with the historic nature of Kenema. Some examples of that is that and I'm just going to forward to the next slide. If you look at the site plan, the homes are sited in a way where none of them are pointing in the same direction or oriented in the same direction across the site. So, Kenema is this amazing collection of homes that were kind of, in a way, sort of randomly placed throughout the hillsides of Kenema over time. So, our goal is for this, even though it's a new development, to kind of feel like it was randomly placed over time as well. So none of the homes are, for example, the homes that are both on the, those are set back from each other. They don't line up with each other on the property. So there's a relief there. There's a relief going back to the next home on the property back here. So all the homes are sited in a way that there is strong relief from the adjacent property and from the adjacent homes on the site, so that there's always a sense of space and views to the surrounding landscape and the hills of Kenema and views through the property. An example of, we think, what you wouldn't do is to have all the homes oriented in one direction on the property, where you would have a very monotonous kind of rhythm of homes side by side. So in terms of the overall siting, we think we're doing a pretty good job at orienting and siting the homes on the site, so that, and of course the topography gives us a little help in that too, so that the homes are feel like this kind of random quality throughout Kenema. Random and interesting quality. The next thing I wanted to kind of focus on is the siting, and is another point of the siting, is that the homes are all oriented around this wetland on the site. So we are preserving this wetland on the property as an amenity, and we believe that is a wonderful kind of in a way, a kind of random quality of the natural kind of landscape and environment that moves through Kenema, and we're preserving that on the site as an amenity on the property. So we really believe that preserving the wetland and having that be a part of the project is a way that we're aligning the project with the values and sort of nature of the Kenema neighborhood, because we're kind of inviting the natural world to be a part of this development. And Kenema is really about that. It's really, and I'm not an expert on Kenema. Christina is, and other people in the community are, but we really think that that is a kind of wonderful way to say that this project belongs in Kenema and it's a part of that neighborhood and part of that community by preserving the wetland and orienting the homes in a way that they sort of relate to the wetland. Whether or not that's specifically mentioned in the neighborhood in the historic guidelines, I don't think it specifically mentions anything about wetlands specifically, but it does talk about the character and the quality of that place. So we feel like we're doing a good job at kind of being in character with the Kenema neighborhood. I'll briefly touch on the sizes of the homes. They're an average of 800 square feet, but they vary in size. The smallest being 600, the largest being 1,100. And we've arranged the homes on the property so that no two size homes or no two height of homes are right next to each other. And I'm just going to go to, I'm going to scroll forward to one of the elevations to make this point. So here on the 4th Avenue elevation, this is the home that faces 4th Avenue, this one here. This is a smaller 600 square foot home. But the home in the background here, this one back here, is about 8 feet higher, and the roof line is higher than this home. And Kenema is really about this kind of, quality of homes not being cookie cutter right next to each other. So the way that we're citing these homes we believe is in alignment with that kind of story and narrative and character of Kenema. On the Miller Street elevation, these are the two homes that face Miller. And at first glance, you might say, well, there's two homes that are kind of right next to each other. This one is a little taller than this one. This was the smaller 600 square foot home. This one is an 800 square foot home. But this one is set back from this house, which you don't really read in the elevation. You can see it in the three-dimensional views that we're showing on the other drawings. And then this home is back, about 50, 60 feet from Miller Street. So this is we believe is another example of kind of fitting in with the context of Kenema. I'm just going to go scroll back to and I apologize for kind of going back and forth, but this drawing here is basically a site section cutting through the wetland on the property, with the landscape hidden from view, and it shows the view kind of on the property looking at. This is Miller Street over here, and these are the existing Douglas fir trees separating this property from the one to the north on the corner, and then so that's the house that's right on Miller, and then these are the internal houses, and this is the property line on the west. And I think this is a good kind of illustration of the variety and texture, if I can call it that, of the homes, varying in size and height and in elevation too. Every house is a little different, and it relates to its own individual context on the site. Even though the homes are generally rectangular in plan. There's a lot of opportunities with the elevations, with the way that we treat the volume and the massing within the historic guidelines for us to create a lot of variation in the homes, which is a wonderful thing, rather than doing the typical cookie cutter approach. And I'm just going to go back to the site plan for a moment. A couple of things I'd like to point out in the site plan is the massing on Miller Street, which is, this is Miller Street here. The two homes that are on Miller Street, again, one is smaller and one is larger. One is taller and one is shorter. And then we have a parking area here that is mostly hidden from view with trees out at Miller Street, new proposed trees. And then, of course, these Douglas fir trees that are on the property that really create these trees on the property line really create a space, between those trees and the ones on the hillside. This photograph here illustrates the point, showing those existing trees that separate the property. So when you're driving up Miller Street, after coming down 4th Avenue and going up Miller Street to leave Kenema, we think that the parking will be very well protected from view from the Miller Street experience generally. And then this home being set back so far from the Miller property line, again, will not have a visual impact on the Miller Street experience by cars or by people as well.
Not to cut you short, but
yes,
we've
sure.
got 4 or 5 minutes left. You may think of some questions that you'd like our specific responses on or reactions to about this proposal. I really appreciate you laying a lot of this out, but I just figured I'd throw that out there that you can continue describing it or you could ask specific questions.
Okay, sure. Yes, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to move to, we've included in the package house plans of some of the specific homes, and I'd love to have I'd love to talk about these specific house plans and some specific questions we have related to that. I guess if we have time, we can go back to some of the more bigger picture items. But what we'd like to ask tonight specifically is one of the things we'd like to do is we'd like to can you see my? You probably can't see my pointer here, but
yeah.
On a couple of the homes, we have a second level within the 1.5 story volume. And then we'd like to come out and have some outdoor porch areas within the volume of the home. Mm-hmm. In other words, the roof would be cut back and there'd be an outdoor area out here off, say, the master bedroom of the home facing the wetland, come out and enjoy the sun, that kind of thing up on the second story. So that's one thing we'd like to ask the board about, if we think that's kind of within the kind of neighborhood character and could work in the Kenema neighborhood. The other thing that we'd like to kind of talk about is an idea about if you look on this elevation here, we have some areas where we're proposing an outdoor deck on the second floor. So that's another point that we'd like to kind of discuss. And then we have, throughout the Kenema neighborhood, the roof lines vary in thickness. Some are relatively thin visually on the gable ends of homes, and we've kind of gone that route. We'd like to make, we've chosen the vernacular style. We think that Kenema is primarily about the vernacular style, especially the homes that are around us. All the homes that are adjacent to our property are in the vernacular. So we've chosen to kind of go the thinner profile in the roof. And I'd love to get comments on that. And then also the We're proposing skylights in various places facing away from the street so that the homes have more natural light on the upper levels. We're not proposing any skylights facing Miller or 4th Avenue. So those are some of the another thing that I'd like to maybe bring up specifically is if we look back at I'm going to go back to this is kind of it's a little tricky in terms of a drawing, maybe for the average homeowner to understand, but basically we're cutting a section through the driveway on coming off of 4th Avenue, and then we have some retaining conditions here, and then there's the house that's up at grade. This dotted line here represents the natural grade now, and we know that we're going to need to do that to get this parking up here away from the street. And then there's also some soils issues. We know we're going to need to in some parts of the site, we're going to need to replace the soil with some better soil, although most of the site has kind of proven to be good soil. But the specific question I wanted to ask, in this house here facing 4th Avenue, we've chosen to do this outdoor porch facing 4th Avenue, and I know that is pretty common in the Kenema neighborhood, generally speaking, and how the board would respond to that specific kind of design situation right there with the house and 4th Avenue. We'd like to get some feedback on just generally how the homes are feeling on the 4th Avenue side and on the Miller Avenue side.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
So I'll conclude there.
I have a question for staff.
Yeah.
So, should we jump into feedback right now?
I would recommend public comment first.
Public comment.
And then you can...
That's kind of what... Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate one more piece. This is a much modern architecture than our design guidelines call for. So, we did in the design guidelines reference that modern architecture could have a place in design, in our districts, but really the burden goes on to the applicant to make that case.
Yeah.
The design guidelines, we kind of created this safe harbor for people who wanted just to follow design guidelines to get approval.
Yeah.
So this is just more recommendation to everyone as we move forward that really it's up to the applicant to kind of make that case why in this situation this alternate design does not adversely affect the district or could be mitigated. It really is almost like an alternative proposal because it really is. It does not meet the traditional design standards. Doesn't mean it can't be approved, but the burden is going on the applicant to kind of make that case as almost an alternative design.
Yeah. Chris.
Can I just make a quick observation, comment? Yeah. Is that the proportions, just for the people that are here looking at the screen, the PowerPoint is not, it's being stretched, unfortunately. So the proportions definitely are not correct.
Oh, they're quite a bit off. Yes.
Yeah.
From what we see on our screen, that's substantially wider.
Yeah. So in the discussion related to those kinds of things, what you see on the screen is a little bit stretched.
Thank you for that clarification, Chris. Okay. I'll ask you to take a seat. We'll invite folks from the audience up one at a time. Let's start with Clint and Victoria Goodwin.
And I will start the...
Thank you for joining us. Please state your name and address for the record.
I have handouts for you as well.
Oh, excellent. And please sit down and speak into the mic, if you will.
Let's take that. Oh, got it.
My name is Clint Goodwin, Oregon City, Kenema resident. My house is actually sides two property lines of that project there.
And I'm Victoria or Tori Goodwin. I too live at 502 4th Avenue in Kenema.
So go ahead.
I just thought you'd start. As Mr. Stagg said, he came and shared a really cool model and all these drawings to us at the Kenema Neighborhood Association meeting, which was very nice of him to do. Appreciate the more information we can get, obviously, because our home sits and is pretty much going to be boxed in on two sides by this development, so it's a huge thing for us. I guess my main concern is the density of this project. Looking through the historical guidelines, which I had actually never really, I mean, when we first moved into the neighborhood, because we were buying a historical home, you have all these questions of, what can I do, what can I not do? And so you kind of breeze through them, but we didn't really want to change our house much, so I didn't dive into them. But I kind of did in this, and I really feel like the guidelines are awesome. They're really strong. They really seem to protect Kenema. And when we first moved in, I think it was Patty or Greta, and Greta unfortunately just passed away, when they were introducing themselves to us, and they said, Kenema is magical. And it totally summed it up once I got to know Kenema. And a cottage home development, from my eyes, I see parking lots, I see traffic, I see small homes, the architecture is beautiful, but it's not what Kenema is about from my view. The density is so different from the rest of the neighborhood. We're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 homes, and in a pretty small area, actually, around our home. So I think Clint highlights more. I kind of put this packet together, made a statement at the beginning. You guys can read it, or I could read it out loud, no big deal, and kind of took a couple quotes from your guidelines, and then also highlighted things that, from the little information we've gotten from Mr. Staggs, I can kind of say, wait, it doesn't fit here, or it doesn't fit here, or this isn't allowed. Obviously, there's a lot more details to this that we don't know, but from the overlay view of what's happening, it doesn't fit the rhythm of Kenema. It doesn't fit the layout of Kenema, and it's a scary situation. I guess, especially the drive down Miller Street will change. The drive on 4th, it just seems like it would change to become something completely different.
So I get my 3 minutes now?
Actually,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Okay.
So hold on.
So this map, I did do a little color thing, and there's a little key at the top. You have red for proposed new houses, cottages. You have yellow line, or the orange is the outline of the property line proposed. The proposed parking lots is highlighted in purple. You're looking at a 6-car, I think he said there's 10 spaces total. You have a 6-car parking lot, which will be alongside my driveway. If you look at this sheet here, this is my house in blue, property line, and this is surrounding my house. There's a couple questions I had for this property that doesn't go with Kenema. Is there 2 houses, 1 lot? So therefore, you can't buy the property. You can't own the land. So how are you going to have 2 houses on one piece of property that isn't splittable? So he had mentioned in one of his meetings that it was HOA. So is it a detached condo type thing going on? Is it a homeowners association obviously going on? But that's what he's planning. That's what he told us. The 6-car parking lot will line our driveway where our kids play and skateboard and ride their bicycles, and then another parking lot on the other side. Another thing that really wasn't pointed out, and I'll bring up some of the not allowed portions, but is on the other end on 4th Avenue. He said that there's a 10-foot drop, a 10-foot retaining wall stepped. And if you look at the property from 4th Avenue, the topography goes in a line, and all the homes are built on top of that. He wants to bring that down and put the homes in between and have a 10-foot between with a 4-car parking lot in the middle. It puts my house on a hill, the next house on a hill, and then you have that weak spot in the middle. And being that's a slide area, I don't know if that's a good idea. In some of from the building and Kenema new build guidelines, it's important to realize it says south of 3rd Avenue. That means from 3rd up the hill is what a lot of this talks about. And on this page here, it would be page, it's not numbered,
Sorry.
but our house is actually pictured on it. says lots range from 50 to 100 to 100 to 100 feet to contain a single house. This is for the bungalow style. House placement to suit the existing topography and most level lot portion, especially south of Third. So basically what it goes, and down below in the vernacular style, it says lots range from 50 to 100 foot, 100 foot to 100 foot squares, and contain a single house. He's putting 2 to 3 houses on lots. That's not what Kenema is about. The other thing I want to point out, I got 30 seconds left. Next page back says not allowed. Irregular spread buildings within a regular spaced neighborhood context. If you look at the small little map that's right below that, you'll see in each lot, the houses are regularly spaced on this
I'm
page.
looking for your page, yeah.
Okay, the next page,
7 seconds. Go.
the last page, I also wanted to bring out in the bottom. This bottom, it shows a manhole lid with a scoop. Construction out of scale with the district. These are not allowed. Excessive regrading or removal of vegetation that adversely affects the historic context of the district and surrounding area without mitigation. And that's exactly what's going to happen to the west of me by dropping that topography down 10 feet and placing homes in the middle and within a flood zone, to be honest with you. Ask any neighbor from 1996 to tell you that was 6 feet underwater. That whole area he wants to build, those houses, if it happens again, will be in underwater. So that's all I got in my 3 minutes.
All right, Clinton,
I
Victoria.
went as fast as I could.
You did a great job of being concise,
All right.
having well thought through arguments and points, and I really appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Paul, will you join us? Does Paul have to give his address for the 3rd time tonight? Okay.
Every time.
He actually never has
Yeah.
to give an address. He can just
Yeah,
say,
Paul Edgar,
Oregon
Oregon
City
City, Kenema. That's a tough act to follow. I mean, they really nailed it. The density in here, it's unprecedented, and that violates the building guidelines. The amount of space after you pull out the wetlands away from it, the amount of space that will be covered with buildings, again, violates the building guidelines. The designs of the buildings and the cutting away of the roofs and stuff like violate the building guidelines. The cutting of the soil, as they so wonderfully said, violates the building guidelines. The garages, or the lack of garages, but the parking lots, 2 parking lots, there's never been anything like that in Kenema, in a National Register Historic District where it's supposed to be appropriate and supposed to be compatible. There's nothing about that that's compatible, and the parking lot actually goes out right into the street, into Miller Street.
May I ask, you say that this has never been done before in a National Historic District, or in this?
It has not been done in Kenema.
Okay.
And so
Thank you for clarifying.
In
Okay.
Kenema, and it does then deviate from historically what has been done in Kenema, and creates therefore what I would perceive as being inappropriate. The walls for cutting away, when you have a 10-foot high wall, that again is not something that will pass code. It's greater, to the best of my knowledge, that we can't, from what I read here, that's not something we could do. I would love to see a development on this property that maintains some degree of density similar to what we have in Kenema, so as that it does not detract. And I think that can be achieved. I personally believe that there should be a setback, a consistent setback on the wetlands that would be equal to what we
practice in a code. Or if we don't want to have a wetlands setback, then let's change Oregon City's code. But just because was not mapped, even though it was in the historic registry document that said that there was a wetlands right there. So we've known it's a wetlands. The waterworks is right above it. We know that it's always been there.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And next we'll hear from Ron.
Is the official spokesman for the Neighborhood Association on Land Use Matters, so I don't know if that gets it.
Okay, well, we should say that publicly. Ron, I believe you're the official spokesman for...
I am.
Yes, thank you.
So I get more minutes?
For the Canema Neighborhood Association on Land Use
Extra
Matters.
15 seconds.
So as long as you're speaking on behalf of the neighborhood, you can
I will
have
speak
the-
on behalf of the neighborhood for only a few minutes. Like,
Did you say 15 minutes?
No, a few minutes, sorry. A few minutes. Ron Beiswein, currently building a home at 712 4th Avenue. We sat before your board 3 years ago and finally received building permits this last September. So the gentlemen have been here before, we know have a long road to haul to get approved and start building. As far as Canema Association, they've asked me to be the liaison between the neighborhood and you. The reason is because this development was a surprise to us. Only thing we knew was happening is when a bulldozer showed up and started clearing land that the neighborhood knew. So they've asked if I would come, since I've been through this process in the last 3 years, to help them see what's going on in the neighborhood. Tori mentioned that we did get an official presentation by the developer. I got a little one about a few months ago when he first came after he started bulldozing. And from my recollection, I need to go back, but I thought he had 4 lots and going to build 5 houses. So it took me by surprise a little bit when I saw this new plan come in the other day, and I think it took the neighborhood by surprise. So as far as the neighborhood goes, there hasn't been much comment on it from the neighborhood officially, so there will be some later after we get together and discuss it as a neighborhood. We just heard about it the other night. But from my personal opinion, not from the Canema Neighborhood Association opinion on this, is a few things, okay? He brought a great display of a model of the project. But a lot of us are visual and some are technical. Mr. Metzen, you're very good at drawing, looking at things, drawings I hear for you today. What I see from this project is the houses are within a few feet of each other. I see 2 of them that way. I see 3 of the 7 houses, which is about half of them at 600 square feet at 1.5 story. So technically that footprint of that house is about from here to you. Right, because you have a third of it upstairs or half upstairs, downstairs. That's not very big. My office is bigger than that house. That does not show the true size in the Canema neighborhood of historical districts. Parking was also talked about here. I know the Neighborhood Association and you guys had parking issues with the park being built. There's more parking here than there on site than there is at the park up the street. And a lot more people use that park than are going to use these homes. So that shows you that you've already said to the city and to the county that parking is important in Canema, but it also is distracting. Okay, you wouldn't let them build the park, build more parking. Definitely this homing project has too much parking. That means too much space used up. Water retention in developments and water retention is a big deal. Going down Myers Extension, they pour new lots in and building houses there. They have a water retention in there for those houses. I do not see that in these drawings. So there's a lot of stuff we don't know yet, okay? Again, they brought to us. Until we start seeing more drawings and more description, I don't think the Neighborhood Association can officially comment on the development. And again, I think you've also had the same issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Oh, man. I have so much to say, but I think we will start with Bob, and we'll work our way this way.
I don't want the last word.
Well, I'll have the last word. I'll go on a diatribe.
I have some larger questions around this issue. Given what Christine said, there are guidelines, and then there is the possibility of a waiver of those guidelines in certain circumstances.
Yeah.
Which sounds like this one's going to call for that. Let me finish, and then we go. What I don't know is under what conditions we would or would not provide a waiver. Or do we have some criteria? Do we have benchmarks? Do we have anything that will help guide us in our thinking about granting a waiver if requested? And I can't see how this is going to meet the guidelines, so we're going to be facing that issue.
Okay.
So that's one of the big issues. The other is, given all the comments, there's a number of issues laid out here that are going to be solved by other agencies in the city. For instance, excavating that one area and then building retainer walls to put in the parking lot, that's really not our decision whether it's allowable or not allowable. So we need to sort out what they need to do before it can come to us for final review, and how that timing is going to go. Those are my big questions.
I can answer the one about the guidelines, if you'd like me to.
Sure.
Okay. So the way the code is written allows for essentially a prescriptive path. If you stay within these bumpers,
right,
you're good to go.
Right.
And then it says, basically, the historic preservation guidelines don't say you have to build a truly historic house. In fact, it says you should not mimic a historic house. But if you go outside those very stringent bumpers, it's up to the applicant to say why it is or why it's not, or why he made those choices, and he's got to provide a lot of information about why that is. So it's not to say that this couldn't be approved. He just has a lot of explaining to do in that.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
So from his side, I understand what his responsibility is. From our side,
yeah,
how do we ensure that we are consistent in our own judgments about that?
That's a good question.
Well, it would seem to me that we would be having to. It would create precedent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have before I make that comment. Question about the cottage home provision in, I'm guessing, the zoning code. Was there deliberation when that code was written as to its inclusion or exclusion from the historic districts?
Sure. No, but I can give you the answer, which is what you are doing right here tonight is the overlay zone.
Is doing that, right.
So while the cottage housing may be permitted, the resulting design, the Historic Review Board can find, while it is still permitted by the underlying zone, by the design, the placement, the size, all the design particulars could be found to be not meeting the design guidelines, or can be found to have an adverse effect and not move forward. So just like a lot of things are permitted in a zoning code, that's the first step. The overlay zone is what's looking at the effect of the permitted use, if that makes sense. The permitted use just means you got to open up the book to look to see if that use could be done on site. But the overlay zone looks at the overall effect and its impact on the district, and conditions could be placed on that to minimize or mitigate that impact.
So though this density is allowed within cottage housing, because it's in an overlay zone, it may not be appropriate for this overlay zone.
Yes.
For instance.
The board can look at the aesthetic and siting impact that the proposal has on the district.
Correct. Okay.
So to go back to the question a little bit, actually, to Mr. Seward, if you strip out the design guidelines, you're still back to the adopted standards in 1740, which is those 9 standards, which are pretty broad. So you still have to make findings that this is not an adverse effect in the district, or if it has been adversely affected, that it's mitigated properly and conditionally. So that's still the big picture review, going back to, it's really the applicant that's providing the findings for the board to agree to that. Like if they really want to think about it that way. Those big picture, whereas the last section of 1740 is and other design guidelines adopted by the board. So we often rely a lot on our new construction or those design guidelines, but it's still linked back to the adopted criteria embedded in chapter 1740, which are more broad than
Right.
we have in the design guidelines.
What I'm concerned about is that we don't wind up saying, well, I'll know it when I see it, and the applicant is returning over and over again, right? Is this it? Well, no, that isn't quite it. That isn't quite it. That isn't quite it. I'd like to be able to agree amongst the board that we have some anchor upon which to make those judgments, so that we're not holding people out forever.
Yeah, and if the applicant did not write down 1740, what Christina just said, that was very applicable to your submittal. The base design guidelines listed in 1740 before it gets into all the details of the different styles. So, with that, Ken?
My turn. Okay, first thing I see when I look at the drawings is that the applicant needs to learn more about window design and placement on vernacular properties. And I understand this is an architect's preliminary rendering, but just looking at the front elevation on the 4th Avenue house, I see a row of windows out there that you would never see on a vernacular. And about that house, the tunneling into the hillside, I think, is going to stand out like a sore thumb in the neighborhood. There is no precedent for doing that. The houses on both sides are, there's just got to be an alternative to that. Then regarding some of the others, I think, Chris, you brought it up, the roof line on the largest house there with the cutaway for the porch. I don't see any precedent for that even on the more modern houses anywhere in Kenema. And I would suggest possibly looking at putting a dormer roof over that, something to take that contemporary characteristic out of it. And then my final comment, having attended the Kenema Neighborhood Association meeting, and for those who don't know, I am the secretary of the Neighborhood Association, and this afternoon I undertook the task of writing the minutes, which meant listening to the audio recording. And I have to say, I didn't hear a lot of support for the project. I heard the main criticism that I heard over and over and over is the concern about density. One member made quite a point, and a valid one, about parking, that we don't live in a one car per household society, and all of the surplus cars, because there are 10 parking spaces with 7 houses, you're looking at 14 cars, so there's going to be 4 cars with no place to park in an area that already has parking congestion issues. And I don't have a solution for that. Stack them up. I don't know. Those are my main concerns.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Jonathan?
I appreciate the ideas to interpret, for the architect's personal interpretation of what the style is, and is a really intriguing attempt to mush cottage housing, architectural styles of the neighborhood, grand gestures related to how you might apply cottage housing to the ideas that the neighborhood historically has. And, you know, I guess I could say I could see myself living in one of these. But that being said, it's a radical departure for the neighborhood, and it would be a very difficult justification to basically say, well, there are varying roof lines and varying thicknesses, therefore we chose to vary the thickness of our roof lines. The roof pitches, the what have you. I mean, those are all kind of interesting threads to, and I would expect somebody that spends a lot of time designing innovative places to think about those things and to think about them kind of. I just am having a hard time right now finding the ability for us to look at what was proposed and make a leap that it is an acceptable alternative to the otherwise prescribed guidelines. I'm having a hard time finding. I mean, we're not. I mean, we can talk about the cut out of the roof, or this or that. I mean, really, what they're proposing is we want to do a contemporary interpretation, and then what it basically means is just about everything's out the window, and then we have to agree to that. And I just don't know the justifications here. It's really interesting, but I don't know that it's even worth commenting on the specific gestures, because they have to make a full case to us,
Yes.
rather than just do you like our idea here or that idea there. It needs to be a full case.
I would encourage you to comment on a few gestures that you think would be difficult to justify. Because there are obviously some things in here that just jump out at you as, I don't see how that's appropriate. So it would be helpful to Yakin if you could identify two or three.
I mean, the cutout of the roof, the port. So I mean, there's the sighting issues too, right?
Sighting or sighting?
Sighting. Like the way that on what we're looking at now on the presentation, the upper right elevation with the little bump out with the two smaller windows, or the project. I think a couple of them I saw that there was like a projecting columnless cover over a porch. The very much asymmetric nature of everything, and it's. I mean, there was justification for we chose to vary the roof thicknesses, which I think was an interesting approach. I mean, but the carve outs and everything is, I don't know if it's been fully justified.
Cool. All right. Oh man. So no one's going to like what I have to say about this. No one. I can pretty much guarantee you that. Chris, I could tell you were an architect by the presentation you made and what's here. Folks from the neighborhood, this is probably the most quality design, both in, well, it's very well presented, and this design is very far along. In fact, I wouldn't say this is too preliminary. He's put a lot of thought and effort into many of the moves here. Some appear to be random, but I don't think they are. The quality of this product, looking at housing as a product, is far and above what I would expect to see in this, or someone to spend on a house of this size in this neighborhood. I see a certain irony in that we oftentimes review single-family homes And the comment is, it's too large, the massing's too big, we don't like it because of that. And this is one that is actually truly proportional to the neighborhood, because all of your houses have been added on to in weird and extraneous ways. And these are where most of them actually started, at 500-600 square feet. This just doesn't have the random additions and sloping shed roofs on it yet. As I look at the houses closer to McLaughlin Boulevard down towards the river, I see a density very similar to this. As I look at the neighborhood as a whole, I see small sheds, not so small sheds, garages, 1 to 3 in several houses and yards that give many houses, though they are single-family houses, a similar feeling of density. If you walk around your neighborhood, I would encourage you to look at that as it gets further down the hill. Not up in this area, I will grant you that, but in this area, in the neighborhood, I do see that. There are a few apartment complexes that I would not encourage anyone to replicate and would not be approved today. But there are parking lots here, and we must acknowledge that. To say that there aren't is just simply not true. The second-story porch, we were just looking at an application with 3 fairly obnoxious porches. One, at least it appeared to be 3, because the first one was so high up in the air above a basement.
Derek, if I may interject.
Yeah.
My comments were not that I didn't like the design. It's just that they're going to have to provide a fully documented justification as to why this alternative is.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
okay.
And my comments have nothing to do with you or your thoughts.
I understand. But
like I said, it was just bursting out of me. So your second-story porch, the guy's cantilevering, justify it. The porch covering that's cantilevering, justify it. Don't think you're going to tie it back to the structure and get that approved with steel rods or something of that nature. I don't see that ever getting approved, because I don't see how that you could have findings that would be historically appropriate in any way. But if you think it is, I would encourage you really to dissect the massing, how historic houses are put together. Because if you really do that, I think you could make a basis for a lot of things that I see here. The problem is that many people pursue something that's safe, it's prescriptive, it's in the code, and they say this is appropriate because I see the same detail 3 times, such as the wings that were proposed in the last house. I mean, that's just how it is. For the cutout in the middle of the roof, are there houses in the Kenema neighborhood where they cut out a portion of a gable roof in order to make a porch? Look around, take some pictures. If there is one, bring it back here and explain why this is a contemporary approach to that classic item. The thickness of the roof forms, I second Jonathan's comments. I would be careful with that and have a good thought-out approach for that. My first thought when I looked at 1 or 2 of these was that it appeared to be insulated foam construction or something of that nature. For everyone in the audience, you have plywood, you have insulation, rigid insulation, and then you have another plywood. And you get thicker sections, especially at the roof, that sometimes look bizarre. Vernacular style. It's I would encourage you not to go for a particular style, but make the case of why it's appropriate in this neighborhood. Because if you were to approach it simply as vernacular, that would be a much more uphill battle. The parking lot, not our purview as far as the safety of it. Historical appropriateness of it, well, I see that you're hiding cars, so your neighbors can't see them. So that's a parking lot that's not visible. Something to consider is how you could screen that perhaps with landscaping. The benefit to the neighborhood I see with this is that you don't deal with an awkward situation in the front of that first house fronting 4th Avenue in which you have a lot of sub-basement or area below a porch that's not living space. We are lessening the overall massing of that house. Or you are, by leveling out that area essentially of 40 feet wide all the way back for, no, it's probably more than that, but for that parking lot, because you're taking a large swath, reducing the slope, and then terracing it up to accommodate a house in the front that, again, why you're going to have to justify why it's set below the other houses along that ridge, because everything else is set up high. So I look forward to hearing why. So very interesting. Not bad. It's intriguing. Jonathan was right with that comment. I respect how you are placing everything around the wetland. That really is a focal point that you're pointing a lot of this to. Something to keep in mind is Kanema is very oriented towards the street, not a wetland. You've got a unique situation that you're building around. And I see where you do have streets, you're fronting the houses on the street. So I commend that approach. The density, probably does concern a lot of people, and I wonder if this many houses is appropriate at this location. Again, make the case for it. As I'm looking at the south site section at the parking lot, there's a house directly behind that. If we could pull that up. Steph, pull that up?
It's
South side section. It's the last, no, it's closer to the front.
Not that one. Not that one.
Keep going. Keep going.
You'll get there.
You only have those two?
And that's the side view.
That's a side view.
There's a view from
It's
Fourth.
looking. It's a section parallel to 4th.
Yeah, cutaway hillside, showing the parking lot without the house in front of it.
Okay, well, go back. It's a couple points. So that one, obviously, we've talked about. This element here, and there's another one in which a good portion of it is window on that side. That's a very mid-century modern element. Why is it appropriate here? That's up to you to describe and hit that point. This window, also hard to justify, in my opinion. But if you can, great. I'm not saying that you have to do historical trim or even trim at all, because it doesn't appear that you're doing that. But what I will say is, this size and scale of window is more appropriate than what I see here. And top elevation, which is the one I was trying to get to, the point that jets out and projects, I can see you're trying to cover a door. I don't see how you're going to justify that.
Can I ask a question? Would it be easier to approve 7 glass boxes? Like go full on, like what's his face in Connecticut style?
Mies van der Rohe?
Yeah, Mies van der Rohe. Where it just kind of disappears into the landscape. My point is that because we have to make it an assessment as to whether or not a decided departure from the historic architectural styles is appropriate for Kanema, in which case a glass box would be, say, the most simplest form upon which to have that theoretical discussion. Then, if we agree on the glass box, then what we need to say is, okay, we've decided that a departure from the historic style is something that we're willing and interested in exploring. I'm of the personal belief that when we try to, there's so many examples of this throughout Oregon City where new construction that meets our guidelines it just screams out as being poorly designed and out of context, but we have to approve them because it meets our guidelines. So our guidelines have worked both ways
Yep.
for us. And there have been a few times where we've approved things because we had to. It met the criteria, and then we maybe then had to, if it was a tough pill to swallow, maybe we need to amend our guidelines, right? But the point here is context and appropriateness for the district, and what we would consider to be top-notch design. And these are really, really interesting. I just we're talking about way bigger questions than the thickness of the roof.
And if we look, that was sort of my point earlier, in that in my tenure in 6 years, this project's the first one that has tested our ability to know what it is that we're approving. And we have to have some long discussions, I think, in order to give us some parameters within which we make those judgments. If we don't do that, then it's going to be sort of willy-nilly, and
Well,
that's not good.
I'll say that the library is a good example of something that is not cookie cutter, nor just straight up fits these nice guidelines,
Yeah.
nor the building across the street, which happens
You're
to be a
right.
church.
Yeah.
And both of those, there were a lot of meetings, there were a lot of discussions as to why that is appropriate. Glass box, that's definitely like the far extreme, but I understand it, and I appreciate the question, because that is the point that we have to.
That's right.
That we have to address that, and I say yes, we have approved things that are not direct replications of historic buildings. This is this is a good example of the very few times that we've had to make that decision. I absolutely agree that when things meet the design guidelines, we approve it. But that doesn't always mean we like the design, nor is it good in execution. And I can tell you several times I have looked at things in my 6 or 7 years here, and I've known the building, once constructed, would not be attractive, nor anyone get really excited about it. But it met the criteria. And I can tell you that there's probably a lot of people in the neighborhood that look at this and despise it. But it will probably be one of the more quality things, as is if you saw it somewhere else or even in this location. The most quality construction that you will have seen in quite a while. Assuming it is to the level that this is indicating, which it isn't always. Chris, you may spend a lot of time detailing and describing things to illustrate a quality of construction that would not be required of other applicants. And we don't want to place an undue burden on you, but you're asking for a home run, and so we want to know that you're going to be hitting a home run. Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
It seems to me that this is a bit. It reminds me of an architectural studio I took in undergrad. I mean, because the type of justification that goes into explaining to your architectural professor why these crazy ideas that came out of your head are worthy of a passing grade. It's like Christina said, the burden is on the applicant in this situation, and it's a very academic process. I mean, because what you're proposing is a total abstraction of Kenema, and in your point of view, and I'll be interested to see what comes next. But it's got to be really, really, really clear as to why we are able to accept your version of Kenema reconstituted in cottage homes yeah. So I'm done.
And the 90% of the reason why, this is still on the table and we're talking about it is the massing attention to scale of these to begin with. These aren't 2,600 square foot houses. These are 600 to 1,100 square foot houses, which when you start at that scale, you can make the plays in which you are to maybe make it work. So I'll stop there.
Probably the most convoluted design advice.
No, but I think this was, for everyone here, I think this was really an important step. This is, as everyone has acknowledged, a unique submittal.
Yeah.
And I, at least on staff level, I highly, highly recommended that the applicant come in through design advice as a first step.
It was just kind of cruel though, Christina, because full disclosure, Bob is stepping off the board at the end of the year. I will be stepping off in the near future, but my term ends in
May.
In May, or whenever we can find another architect. So, if you would like consistency, you may want to submit sooner than later. Because in 6 months, this board will look completely different, and you haven't heard from one person will remain on it. So.
Thank you all very, very much. As with always, the applicant may come back for future design advice, or the next time you see this, it may be through the traditional land use process. We do not have a meeting in December, in the new year, we'll review this again. But I'm hoping that the applicant and the neighborhood and the Stark Review Board have lots of things to chew on over the next month or two.
Okay. Is that the last item for the night?
We have a couple of cleanup items, but that's the last major item.
Okay. All right.
Well, let's clean up.
We can move on.
Well, if anyone wants to sneak out now, I totally understand. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to communications.
So the next application is continuing the continuation of HR 1607. As you recall, this is the small little cottage on Hiram.
Yep.
We are still working with the applicant. They really think that they can stay within a staff level approval for exterior alterations and kind of a rehabilitation of the existing house. It was actually under my recommendation that we continue this one more time just in case that there's not some odd 80 square foot addition that's needed and therefore they have to renotice. So this is just at the pleasure of keeping this application open to pursue.
I would entertain a motion to continue this HR 1607.
To the January meeting.
Second.
Jonathan moved. Ken seconded. Sorry, Bob.
No problem.
Shut out again.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Here, I'll say
Trevor?
Jonathan Stone,
Yeah.
Yes.
Ken Basinger,
Yes.
Bob Seward,
Yes.
Chair Metzen.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay. Sorry, I kind of skipped over that one. Now can we go to communications?
Yeah. So
All right.
I also failed at the very beginning. I want to introduce to you Trevor Martin. He's our new preservation planner.
Yay!
Very excited.
Okay.
He started on Halloween, and luckily this winter we're in a good place to have a nice baton handoff, and to kind of help with some of these outstanding land use applications that are kind of in the middle. So I'll probably still be around, but as of the January meeting, probably going to be sitting over there more, and Trevor's going to be taking this. So this is kind of the transition meeting of the two of us. So I'm really excited. And so maybe Trevor, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'll say a little bit about myself. Hi, my name is Trevor Martin. I guess a little bit about my background. Most recently, I was in Yakima, Washington, as staff liaison for the Historic Preservation Commission. We're doing a lot there as far as preservation work. This city was going through their first historic preservation element that's being rolled into their 2040 comprehensive plan update. They're looking at a new historic fruit row and trying to get that on the National Register of Historic Places as a district. So there's a couple of things that we got moving there. And I decided to come to Oregon City. let's see, and work with you and just kind of. I'm excited about Oregon City because it's famous for being the first city in Oregon. So I know there's a lot of history here. There's a lot of parties that are interested in what's going on throughout the city and the region as a whole. And that's kind of one of the big draws that brought me here. Yes.
Well,
I'm very excited.
Thank you, Trevor, for joining us. We're really excited to have you.
Yeah.
It's a big baton to carry, but I'm sure you'll do a great job. And yeah, it's been a pleasure corresponding with you over these past couple weeks.
I try to be open. I try to get back. It's one of the things that I really try to do. If you call me, leave me a message, shoot me an email, I'll try and get back to you within 24 to 48 hours. So I'll try really hard to do that.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
So I have one more item, and that's to complete the direction on the interviews. So we were not able to interview everyone tonight. Trevor's going to contact the two other applicants, and then we'll be in conversation via email if there needs to be interviews before the end of the year or if it can be done in January. So we will be back in contact with you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And hopefully tie in another architect into that conversation.
Yep.
Interview. Okay.
And have a wonderful holiday, and
Yes,
see
you
you
too.
all in the new
Yeah.
year. So
Happy Thanksgiving and Christmas.
and
First time I've
Hanukkah
said
and all
that.
those good things.
That's true.
So I just want to say I've not gone, but I've just absolutely appreciated your hard work on the Historic Review Board, and especially Bob, your time here. I know this is your last meeting, so you've been a great advocate for process, and I think you've been a good voice of kind of the regular resident of Kenema, and looking at understanding to make sure that we are how we speak and how we go through our decision-making process is evident, that we have a clear, kind of an as objective as you can process with our design guidelines. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I
Perfect.
think that's it.
Well, thank
Have
you
a
very
great
much.
Tuesday night.
Yeah, and happy almost birthday to Ken.
Yeah.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.